Small group today, but I'm happy that that we're here. Whoever can be here. It's always nice to spend a few minutes together. Sometimes I like a small group because it's easier if you want to unmute yourselves and you want to say something. I'm happy for you to do that at any time. When I use an expression and I say when Chazal taught us, you know what I mean by Chazal. I want to get you familiar with the lingo, so you start to learn the language as we go along. That you'll just know. We're talking about our rabbis, our scholars. That's a term used for our rabbis, Chazal. It's yeshivish, right? So they don't. So when you go back to any halacha, you're looking to find out what the sources are. Often the first person we look at to see what he said was we look to see what Rambam said. But in this particular category, we're going to look at Ramban, Nachmanides. Why are we looking at Ramban differently? Because I don't want to bore you with this, because I always say that as soon as you say Ramban said or Rambam says, everybody goes for a shluff and falls asleep. But not necessarily in this case. I might have said this, but last week we talked about a definition of illness. Now, why am I discussing this in the first place? Because we all in this group know that if you aren't feeling well, or something's wrong, or you have a bad headache that's abnormal, or you have an illness that's abnormal, or you aren't feeling well, generally speaking, or you have an eye problem, the first thing you're going to do is go and run and get it checked out at a hospital. And that's what I think you should do. And that's what I hope would do, whether it was a Monday, Tuesday, or even Shabbat, right? I don't care. And that's what we would all do, because everybody here together has common sense. But not everybody everywhere has common sense. Some of us need to be told. Some of us in the world need to be told this is what it says. Some people really follow the laws to the letter. Like if it comes to kashrut, they wouldn't use what I would call common sense. And they might say, I better throw this out, or it doesn't have I can't eat this, or what. That's why we learn kashrut laws. There's a whole, there are debates among the poskim, among the rabbis, when it comes to kashrut, like what happens when your cucumber gets cut with a meat knife, and now you want to cut the rest of it the next day for a salad and use it for dairy. I talk about that as an example. Most of us might just keep on just cutting it and say, no, I used it for that. I used it. Who cares what knife touched it? Well, it matters, because the knife that you're using might have touched a davar harif at one time. It might have touched something hot. Now, I'm not using hot as a term like necessarily heat transfer from real heat, like something that's over 104 degrees, let's say, but heat even from a vegetable, like garlic, according to the poskim, according to the rabbis, is considered to be able to transfer heat. An onion can transfer heat. So it's called a davar harif, a spicy thing. Certain spices can transfer heat. So what do I mean by that? Well, heat, it was defined then differently than it is today. We know that if we study physics, that heat might have a boiling point. But when you take a hot pepper, a jalapeno pepper, and put it in your mouth and chew on it, it's going to feel very hot. You're going to burn your mouth. When you'd say, ooh, hot, hot, that's the way the poskim determined heat also. And they're not wrong. You know that a hot pepper is very hot, and things do have heat. If you just chew on raw garlic, it would be very, very hot in your mouth. An onion has a certain heat to it, an element of heat to it. So why do we need to be told this? Is because you're supposed to take off that cucumber that you cut with that meat knife, what they call a kedei klipa. A klipa is a little slice. So you would then take a parv knife and you'd shave a slice off the cucumber, throw it away, just throw the little tiny thin slice away. And now the rest of it didn't come in contact with that meat knife. And you could go ahead and use the rest of that cucumber because you took kedei klipa. So this is how strict many people follow in kashrut the laws. They follow kedei klipa. They follow kedei netila. Netila is the thickness of a thumb. That if you accidentally poured milk because you slopped milk and poured it over top of your cold roast that you haven't even yet put in the oven. It's still cold, that you have to shave off. Some people, there was a machloket. Some people said you could just wash it off. Just wash it off, rinse it. Wash it. It's like, it hasn't even cooked yet. Just rinse it. And some people say you have to take a kedei netila, a thickness, because it may have absorbed in. So you have to take a kedei. And if it's salted, it's an even worse case. So we're going to get into that when we talk about kashrut later on. Salting is even more. There are even more stringencies. What does it have to do with sick people, Shabbat? Because laws are laws. And we have to look at what the sources are, not just question it as do we follow it? Because, you might say, I keep kosher in the home and outside I eat McDonald's. I don't know, like people have, everybody in the Jewish world has rules that they follow and rules that they don't follow. We're supposed to follow all the halachas. We don't always follow all of the halachas necessarily. So we often find leniencies that suit us. Are we supposed to do that? Not really, but we do. I mean, people might say, I'm going over to a friend's house, I'm going to drink a glass of wine. The wine isn't a kosher wine. It's okay because the wine isn't being used for the purpose of kiddush, of kiddush, for sanctification, therefore I'll have it. The conservative movement allows that. See, you raised your eyes, Noreen, you didn't know that probably. That's right, the conservative rabbinate in their, in the laws of their, they have a law group, whatever. Rabbi Shaim served on that law committee. They paskin that it's okay to do that. But, that's if you identify that way. You have to do what's accepted in your community. That's a very strong thing to say. So if you live in a community, and what Rabbi Fink always refers to as his holy neighborhood, in your holy neighborhood, you might feel very bad about getting in your car, turning it on and driving out of your driveway in a frum street like Alex Roth lives on, you got to think about it and go, well, the people, he doesn't care what the people think because he's going to shul and that's it. He's doing a mitzvah. But some people would, would worry about what other people think. Do you care what other people think? Do you not care? I personally feel that it should be okay to ride a bicycle on Shabbat, if we're speaking about Shabbat. But in my neighborhood here, they don't ride the bicycle on Shabbat, so I don't ride a bicycle on Shabbat. I don't do that. You know what I mean? Like there are things that you follow in your neighborhood. So when we're talking about neighborhoods, Ramban gave a definition of illness, and he said that this is, by the way, what we pretty much embrace by all authorities today. This is what we embrace. So this, I could stop, I could tell you this, and we're done. He said that if you have a bad feeling, a feeling in your body that makes you sick so that you are dizzy or you feel ill or you have to go to bed, you have to go lie down, you're going to fall into bed, that kind of illness. John, you felt like that last week. You were sure you weren't feeling well. You had an ear infection, but you didn't know what it was. That ear infection could have been, God forbid, something else that you didn't know. So you didn't take a chance. What did you do? You did the right thing. You went right to the hospital to get checked out. That's exactly what you're supposed to do, even if it's on Shabbat. So you felt like you're going to fall over. You said you felt like dizzy and sick and ill, all of those things. If you feel like that to the point where you're going to be bedridden, but you don't necessarily think your life is in danger, you don't think your life is in danger, you think you're going to make it, you're going to pull through, Baruch Hashem, thank God, right, John? But you don't want to take a chance. You don't want to just say, it'll go away. People do that, and then they might be sorry. Maybe they needed treatment. Maybe they needed medical intervention. That's what the Ramban said. If you feel to the point where you have to go and lie down, it's time to see a healer. They in the Talmud, they didn't use the word doctors. We didn't have doctors really. We had healers. So they were the rofei cholim. We had people that were doctors and physicians, but they practiced medicines in the time of the Talmud that we don't practice today. In fact, Chazal, the term used for rabbis, as we said moments ago, is they say we're not allowed to follow any of the healing practices of the time of the Talmud. Why are we not allowed to follow it? What if they said that you should wear an amulet of garlic, it'll make you feel whatever it is, let's say. So why don't we follow that? Because we know today we have better medical practices, but that's not the reason Rambam said it. Rambam, Maimonides, said you don't follow those laws later because we don't understand it, how they followed it. We're not living in those times. So we really don't know exactly how they used those medical practices. So we're not allowed to do it today. That was already set up by the Sanhedrin, when we had a Sanhedrin during the time of the Beit HaMikdash. We don't have a Sanhedrin today. That's why many of you might think that some of our laws are antiquated. They're antiquated. They came up with a law many years ago. This is in the Shulchan Aruch. I just reviewed it again yesterday. Depending if things aren't salty, that if you accidentally came home with a slice of bologna and a slice of cheese together in the same bag, you can wash them both off, do what's called hadacha. Hadacha, wash them, rinse them. You don't even have to wash, rinse them off, and you can go ahead and eat both of them, the cheese and the meat. They were both cold. There was no heat transfer. That's the rabbi said that. Imagine how much more lenient if we had a Sanhedrin today, how things would be. Well, if you're allowed to use a timer for electricity, then you should be able to use a timer to turn your TV on. If you're allowed to use a timer to turn your TV on, you should be able to use a timer to turn your crock pot so it'll start cooking at a certain time. You should be able to have all of these leniencies that were never established by our rabbis. So among the leniencies, because we always look for leniencies, right? Nobody's looking for chumras. You know what a chumra is? A chumra is a stringency, a strictness. Nobody's saying, I want to be more strict. So there are people that do, but most of us are looking to find ways to be lenient. There's a leniency that pertains to patients, which is a prohibition of asking someone who isn't Jewish to violate Shabbos for you. When are we allowed to do that? And when are we not allowed to do that? So, there was a whole debate among the poskim where they actually, I'm not there yet, but we'll talk first about the Shulchan Aruch. But I think if you think about it, we don't look, I hope we don't. I mean, any of us would ever say ever that it's Shabbat, somebody's in danger medically, they're having difficulties, they're sick, they're ill, they're whatever. On Shabbat, the first thing I would do is Shabbat, I don't care about it. It vanishes. If Shabbat goes away, I need to look after this sick person, whatever that means. Call an ambulance. Pick up the telephone and call an ambulance. Because if you pick up a telephone, what are you doing? It's a midrabanan. It's it's not like such a violation. Just pick it up and just, you have to break Shabbos and pretend Shabbos doesn't exist under those circumstances. That's a hard concept to swallow for someone who lives an Orthodox lifestyle. And that's why they were so strong with it and said, this is what we follow. You see, we live in a different world, the 9 boxes that we have here, because the 9 boxes on the screen, I'm preaching to the, I'm not telling you to do something like that because you would already do it, but not everybody necessarily would. So what is Ramban actually trying to teach us here? He's teaching us that there's going to be, as we go along, 2 categories of discomfort, 2 categories. It comes in 2 levels. Despite the comfort or discomfort rather of dizziness and wanting to fall in bed and feel ill and feel sick, you could, if you have a headache, I'm going to call it a migraine for a minute. You have a migraine, it isn't your worst migraine. People I've had, and you have a headache, and I've got that day where I've got a migraine, and I've been called to officiate at a funeral service that day. And I wake up. Now, certainly, if I can't get out of bed, I would call Rabbi Shaim, I would call Rabbi whoever and say, please, can you fill in for me and do this? I can't get out of bed. Won't make it. But if you're able to function, drive the car, get out, make myself a cup of coffee. Yeah, my head is swirling and I'm not feeling well and I might feel a little bit ill, but I'm not bedridden. That's a different category. I can function like that. Take a Tylenol, take an Advil, keep on going, do the job. I don't give up and just go to bed because I have a bad headache that day. You got to go, you got to work. That is considered halachically trivial. So you got a sore finger, it's trivial. You've got a ingrown toenail, it's trivial. You have your left eye is sore, very sore. It could be trivial. Maybe you just banged it into the cupboard. You opened up the car door and you know that you banged your eye. Ouch, it hurts just thinking about it. But that's what happens. and you have a sore eye and it's black and blue and you don't feel your head hurts from it, but you're not dying, you know, you're not bedridden, you can still cook supper, you can still get up and make breakfast, you seem to be able to watch your news show and do your knitting and do your crocheting and everything you want to do, even though it hurts, your mind is on it. That is not considered halachically a time to violate Shabbos. But some headaches are very mild. Some headaches are very, very severe. How do you know which headache is which? What if you have a headache that you've never had before? The headache of the mother of all headaches. You know, you've had a headache here, you've had a headache there, but all of a sudden that day, you have a headache on a Shabbos morning, you're getting ready, you're going to go to shul, and your head feels like you've never felt this before. It's the headache of all headaches. You don't know what it is. What is the correct thing to do? I don't have to tell you. The correct thing is to phone an ambulance or go to the hospital immediately. Somebody else might say, let it fade. We'll see what happens. Let's see in a few hours from now, maybe you'll feel better. I'm not so sure that I want to take that chance. Chime in if I say the word Ramah, the Ramah. Who is the Ramah? You should know this by now. I'm giving you, this is what I'm come on, somebody. Who is the Ramah? I've told you 35 times already. I'm going to test you on this. The Ramah is Rav Moshe Isserlis, okay? Right? Remember. So Rav, well, it makes sense. Ramah, Moshe Isserlis, Rav Moshe Isserlis. Rav Moshe Isserlis is the Ashkenazi authority that we follow in the Shulchan Aruch. Now, there's a hierarchy to who we follow depending on what the decision is and what the actual halacha is. You know, the Maharshal sometimes overrides. We follow him overriding the Ramah. But often, if I say the Mechaber, remember who's the Mechaber? Come on, Adele, you should know this by now. You don't know. Okay, you guys, I'm gonna make you. I'm gonna send it out to everybody. A sheet of terminology. I think it's a good idea now. So what I'll do is I'll make a sheet of terminology and I'll send it out to you, I'll email it to all of you. And then when I say something, you don't know what it is, you look it up and it'll say, oh, this is this person, this is who he's talking about, right? So the Mechaber is the Rav Yosef Karo. So when I'm learning, like I'm learning Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week, it's brutal and getting ready for this exam. It's absolutely brutal. It's 180 questions, and they go through 50 in an hour, and 50 in 2 hours. I apologize, 50 in 2 hours, and if it goes over, so you spend another half hour going through more. And they don't tell you who anybody. They just everybody's by acronym, right? Even all the terminology. So if you're talking about the Mechaber and the Ramah, you're talking about Isserlis and Karo. And Karo is the Sephardic opinion, right? In the Shulchan Aruch. So if I'm showing you a page of Shulchan Aruch, everybody should have one. You'll see in the Shulchan Aruch that the dark black lines is the Mechaber, and the lighter lines at the bottom are the Ramah here. And then on each side, you have the Shach and the Taz, okay? And when I say the Shach, who is the Shach? The Shach argues with Moshe Isserlis all the time. He argues often with Rav Moshe Isserlis's opinion and doesn't always agree. The Shach was married to the granddaughter of Rav Moshe Isserlis. So he's arguing with his wife's grandfather. It's interesting, you know, they married into each other's family. So what do you do in that case of the severity? You have a headache, you've never had it before like this. Bedridden means what? If you're bedridden, what does that mean to you, John? What do you think? Like I say bedridden, what does that tell you? You're not able to, you're limited.
Very much so. You can't concentrate. You feel like you need to sleep. And
Okay.
your energy levels go down to about 10–15%. You just can't do anything.
Exactly. Now, that's a good, yeah, excellent. So when your energy level goes down and you're not able to function, because I said now you're bedridden and you're limited, that means now would you say that that's affecting just the one area? Like, let's say it's your, I don't know, let's say it's your heart. Your heart. Would you say that that's an issue that is only affecting just your heart, or is it affecting your whole body?
Everything.
Everything. That's exactly what I'm looking for. The question becomes, is it a local problem or is it a whole body problem? So remember last week we talked about the eye. The guy gets, the person gets punched in the eye. No, the person, I said, woke up and they're seeing flashing in their eyes. Now, we'll just call it right now what it is. It was a detached retina, but they don't know that. They never heard of it. All they know is they have flashing in their eye. And they go and they see the rabbi. Rabbi, what should I do? Shabbos morning, knock on the door. Rabbi, what do I do? My eye is flashing, whatever it is. Both eyes or one eye? No, just the left eye, Rabbi. That's okay. Don't worry. It's not your whole body. If you go blind in the one eye, you'll still have the other eye. But that's silly, right? So if your eye is flashing, this is the important part. Does Chazal, do our rabbis say that it's only your left eye? If you go blind, it's true. You get a detached retina, you don't get it looked after, you're blind in that eye. So it's true. Do I need two eyes to see? Max davened beautifully with a patch over his eye this morning with one eye, the whole davening. So I don't need two eyes. One eye is plenty. Do I say that? No, we don't say that. We say, and this is the beauty of Chazal, of the rabbis. They say that that person should go immediately to get that eye looked after so that they will have both eyes, so that, and violate Shabbat today, because we're talking about illness on Shabbat, violate that Shabbat so that later on they will be able to enjoy many more Shabbatot by seeing. You'll be able to study, you'll be able to learn, you'll be able to see your way to shul, you'll be able to, all the things, cooking for Shabbos, getting ready on Shabbos, sing Zmirot. But with one eye, if you lose an eye on Shabbos because you didn't do anything about it, that might spoil, well, I think it would spoil many more Shabbatot. Now, if something happened where, God forbid, somebody lost an eye, of course, you try and look on the brighter side of things and you say, this was something that happened, I couldn't help it, I have one eye, okay, Baruch Hashem, I can still see. But we don't look for a way to say, no, one eye is good enough. So the Chazal says, if you have a bad eye like that, and you get it looked after, think of all of the Shabbatot afterwards that you'll be able to enjoy. So you're doing it for the purpose, actually, of getting healed so that later on, you'll be able to have a lot more Shabbatot to enjoy. That's their thinking. That's how the rabbis were thinking. Another example. There was a dye, a certain dye that is mentioned in the Talmud, and it was blue. Different, let's say, than techela, than what we use for our tzitzit. And this blue dye was put on the eyelids, it was painted on eyelids for someone who was bedridden. That's what they did back then. So do we do that today? No, we don't do that today. Today we take a Tylenol or an aspirin, right? That's what I'm saying. We don't follow the medical practices of the Talmud because we didn't understand it. But this blue dye, which we may not even know what it is today, was painted on the eyelids because it served as an antiseptic of some kind for the eyes. It's some kind of an antiseptic that was absorbed into the body. Now, the question became then, at that time, was what are you allowed to ask a non-Jew for you to paint this dye on your eyelids? You'll see later why I'm bringing it up, because Alex, you haven't painted any dye in your eyelids for a long time. But the thing is why are you doing this? Because someone had a minor complaint.
Well, that's only because I ran out.
You ran out, right? You had a minor, no, you would just pour yourself a drink and say, call it a day. But the thing is when you are still functioning normally, you can't ask somebody to paint something on your eyelids. No, but I'm saying you're bedridden and you can't, you have a head. So they painted this dye on as a thing. So what are we trying to learn here? What are we trying to say? Well, there's how many malachas, how many violations are there that you can do on Shabbat? Does anybody know? Shout it out. They were listed. There's a certain number of violations that you're not supposed to do. Things, most of them have to do with farming, by the way, because that's what we were. We were all farmers. Well, think about it. You can't sew. I don't mean sewing like needle and thread. You can't do that either, by the way. I'll tell you why. You can't sew because that's putting two things together permanently. You can't attach two things permanently. That's called constructing or building on Shabbat. But let's say, that's why, by the way, you're allowed to use a safety pin on Shabbat. You're allowed to use a safety pin to hold together a skirt or something came apart, because a safety pin is not permanent. It's temporarily. You can just open it up and take it out, right? But you can't sew because sewing is permanent. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how many malachas, how many violations. Another, you can't sow in the field, planting seeds, right? You can't pick. You can't sort. There's no sorting of the categories of the grains. You can't sort the grains on Shabbat. So that extends sorting. Does that mean that when I'm putting my forks and knives into the cutlery drawer, that I can't put the forks in the fork compartment and the spoons in the spoon compartment? I'll just leave them all on the counter willy-nilly. And then after Shabbat, I'll put them away in their proper categories. There are people that do that. So when you put them in the dishwasher, you're not going to use it. You're just putting them into the dishwasher. And that's a whole different topic about using dishwashers on Shabbat with a timer. I talked about that in technology before, but remember that? But when you have in a dishwasher racks that say compartments, forks, knives, spoons, whatever, are you allowed to sort them and say, well, the knives go together in the knife thing and the spoons go in the spoon thing? And you can't do that on Shabbat. You have to just put them all together, boom, into the one thing, which, by the way, is better to do in a dishwasher anyway, because if knives are all touching up against each other, they won't clean properly. If spoons nest in a dishwasher, they won't clean properly. So really, you should actually put them in so a fork is up against a spoon and a spoon is up against a knife, because then the bends keep the cutlery separate. That's a dishwasher secret for you, in case you didn't know that. But how many malachas, how many violations are there for Shabbat? There's 39 violations, okay? Well, one of the violations is dyeing, and I don't mean about dropping dead. I'm saying dyeing, like dyeing clothing, D-Y-E-I-N-G, that kind of dyeing. Is that the right way of spelling it? D-Y-E, right? Not D-I-E. Don't die on Shabbos either. Well, if you're going to die, maybe that's a good day to die, but I don't die at all. D-Y-E dyeing is called soveya. Well, seva is color, right, Esther? It's color. Unmute yourself. Help me with the Hebrew.
Color is tseva.
Tseva. Okay. So soveya means to color, according to the Gemara. It's like it's one of the malachas. So coloring, soveya, that's what they call it. Dyeing. Can't do that. So how can you paint the eyelids on Shabbat? So can you ask a non-Jew to do that dyeing of your eyes? Because the dye doesn't come off so easy. You're probably going to walk around with blue eyes for at least a week. Alex, if you're going to walk around with blue eyes for a week, I recommend sunglasses. So the issue is that the bottom line is that what we're getting to here, before we get to the tasks of asking a non-Jew to perform something for us on Shabbat, because we're going to, some people do that. And can't you? Well, if you're really, really sick and you have to cook for yourself, don't ask anybody else to do it. Just do it yourself. Shabbat should you're ill. If you're sick and you got to take care of yourself, just do whatever you have to do. But there's two categories. And both of these categories have to do with asking somebody who doesn't believe the same way you do. They're not Jewish. Can you ask them to perform a task which will benefit a patient or even yourself? And there's two rules. And the two things are, yes, you can. If your functioning is reduced, you can't get out of bed. You're just ill. You stand up. You feel. I've had I don't know if it's a flu, but I've had something like that before, where you stand up and you just feel like you just want to pass out in bed. You're going to be out of it for a day or two, and then you jump back to yourself, right? Or if you have pain throughout your body, so you stub your finger and it only hurts here, that's not good enough. That's not pain throughout your whole body. It's pain in your finger. You might take an aspirin or whatever, but it's not your whole body. If you have something going on with one of your organs, I would say that doesn't just affect only your organ, because they all work together. That affects your whole body. So if you have something which is affecting your whole body, or your functioning is reduced, now we created two elements, two reasons for violating Shabbat. Those two things come down from the Ramban. And he is going to create for us a whole way of thinking, which is going to lead us to what you can do and what you can't. Further, he says that in any event, someone who has discomfort in his or her teeth, for instance, a toothache, he says you're not allowed to rinse with vinegar. You can't swill, like, they did use in those days, like a salt solution today, maybe, or whatever it is. Similarly, someone who has a pelvic discomfort should not put oil on it. That's what they did. They would anoint themselves with oil if they had a pain in their tummy. Someone who has a sore throat should not swallow oil for the throat. The Ramban is saying, in his opinion, that in order for leniency to apply, you should have a limitation in functioning. And if it's only a toothache or a sore throat, you're not supposed to take a throat lozenge. Do we follow that today? You have a sore throat, you're not going to take a throat lozenge? I would take a throat lozenge. But that's what he's saying. So his approach will lead other rabbis to interpret what he's saying and say, no, when he said that, he really meant this. That's what happens in the rabbinate. They take a look at what somebody wrote and they said, oh, surely he didn't mean that. So it says in the Gemara that we don't apply leniencies if the patient only has a minor discomfort. You got a pinky, it hurts, you don't apply a leniency. But if the patient has a lot of pain, even if it's in one place, then leniencies apply. Now, the Vilna Gaon, the Gaon of Vilna, you've all heard of him. He gives us a little bit more category. He's already looking in and he's saying, no, we mean this. And he says, if you have functioning that is reduced, perhaps bedridden, if you have pain throughout your whole body, that's another reason. Or 3, listen to this, it's getting better. If you have a lot of pain in one area. Oh, Baruch Hashem, somebody who has a brain. Not that the Ramban didn't have a brain, God forbid, I hope he forgives me. But I'm saying it makes sense. I think the Ramban meant that anyway. And I think the Vilna Gaon is interpreting what the Ramban said by saying, no. If it's a lot of pain in one area, a lot of pain in your eye, a lot of pain in your tooth, you go to the dentist, you call it emergency and go and get that abscess looked after. You have a lot of pain in one area of your body, that's not normal. Then you got to do something. So that's what the Vilna. Now, we've now taken it from 2 categories, which is just functioning reduced and pain throughout the whole body, to even pain in one area. A lot of pain in one area is enough to violate Shabbat. So any one of these 3 categories are enough to give you a reason now for leniency to fall into place. So the Chochmat Shlomo, That's how he's known. And in my school, they would say the Chochma Shlomi. The Chochma Shlomo says, and he's Rav Shlomo Kluger, but you never hear Kluger in yeshiva. They'll never discuss his name. You don't hear it. It's Rav Shlomo Kluger is 19th century. So it's already later. And he said, he was asked by someone about their eyes being affected by blindness, an illness which is called, are you ready for this? This is not derogatory. This is what they called it then, a schwarze Stor. A schwarze Stor means a loss of vision. So it means not a black eye like somebody punched you. A schwarze Stor means that your eye is going black inside. You're not seeing properly. That's what it means. That the person he's a hopeless case and the physicians can't figure out anything to help this person. They don't know what to do. And the doctors say there's a city that the physicians said that doesn't have many Jews there. I don't know. Name a city that doesn't have many Jews. Sturgeon Falls. In Sturgeon Falls, I don't know if there's any Jews in Sturgeon. There's moose, but there's no Jews up there. There's no shul there. There's a shul in North Bay, but there never was ever a shul or a shtibel in Sturgeon Falls. So he says, you're going to go to Sturgeon Falls. He doesn't say that. He says, you're going to go to a city, but we'll call it there. And he said, in that city, they don't have many Jews. And there's this non-Jewish hospital that is willing to accept this patient. And they think they can cure this patient. The person can now see a little bit. And the patient at the moment doesn't fall into the category of sickness otherwise. The rest of them is okay, but the eye is not good. There's no pain, no suffering, but the patient is in danger of blindness. What do we think it is today in modern terms? What's going on here?
With the eye, you mean?
Could have a detached retina,
100%.
have the vitreous humor pulling away from the retina.
100%. That's what's going on. But then they didn't know exactly. This is why they called it this. And they referred to it this way. We didn't know that then. So they're saying, go to that hospital up in Sturgeon Falls where there's a non-Jewish doctor who will be able to help you. And if the patient goes to that hospital, it's Dorton, Esther, the hospital's Dorton, he will have to eat non-kosher food. What's the halacha? There's no kosher food at this hospital. He's going to be there with sandbags on his head. That's what they have to do, keep you still. Today, they give you a little laser thing and they send you home. In 3 hours, you're home. Back then, you had to keep very still. You had to lay like this in a bed. They would hold sandbags. Your head can't move. Who knows? That's what they did. What's the halacha? Now this person has to go to a hospital for, I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. There's no kosher food there. In Sturgeon Falls, I can get kosher food in Sturgeon Falls because there's a grocery store called No Frills. And in No Frills, you'd be surprised how many products there are with a hechsher. It's unbelievable. Obviously I can't buy kosher hot dogs or meat up there that I have to bring, but you go there, they got tons of vegetables and lots of fruits. They have canned goods. They have soups with hechshers on them. They have tons of things, tons of products today in every grocery store, but not then. And they're not near a grocery store. So he goes up there. The answer Rav Shlomo Kluger wrote was, he says, everyone knows that if someone's life is in danger, you have to do whatever it is to save the life on Shabbos. Okay, we all know that. The reason that we violate Shabbos is to save someone's life for exactly the reason that I told you earlier, which is so that he will be able to have many more Shabbatot to enjoy in the future. So that's why we set aside Shabbat. So it becomes an issue of how far do you take the leniency to eat non-kosher food? So, according to Rav Yehuda in the Gemara, a blind person is exempt from all mitzvot. Did you ever hear that? Today, a blind person can have a walking stick, a helper, a seeing eye dog. They can read Braille. They didn't have that then. They have signs. You go into an elevator and it's in Braille. You can touch and know where you're going. There was nothing like that then. You'd walk on a dirt road. There was paved streets weren't paved and get run over by a horse and buggy. You were exempt from mitzvot because how are you going to see to put on tefillin? How are you going to see to know the difference if you're eating something kosher? How are you going to see the Sidur to daven? There's no Braille Sidur in then. How are you going to read the Torah? You can't see the Torah. The Torah is not written in Braille. You can't. How are you going to I think of all the mitzvot. You have to get to do tashlich, to get to the water. That's dangerous. You fall in the water. You can't go and do tashlich. You're blind. You're exempt from all the mitzvot in the Gemara. That means goes all the way to say that you don't have to eat matzah on Pesach. You don't have to hear shofar on Rosh Hashanah. And according to Rabbeinu Yerucham, one of the greatest Rishonim quoted by the Beit Yosef is Yosef Karo, which is the author of the Shulchan Aruch. We talk about him all the time. What else is the Rav Yosef Karo called besides the Beit Yosef? He wrote a book called Beit Yosef. What else is he? The Mechaber, right? So he's got a few names. You get to know them all. That's the opinion that we embrace. That you're blind, you don't have to follow mitzvot. So think about that. If the person were to go blind, you're destroying the opportunity for this person to do something that they love to do. What do we love to do? We love to learn, otherwise you wouldn't be here today. You love to go to shul, otherwise you wouldn't be there. You know, all of the people I'm talking to are all in shul and Shabbos, every single one of you. Everyone. This is why we're such a small group here. Because if 100 people came to shul, maybe 100 people would be on Zoom learning. But this is, I'm looking at this, is every single one of you are in shul. Rose Haspel on my top right corner, she comes to shul. Everybody here comes, John, Marvin, Adele, Ava, Alex, Esther, we're all in shul. So if I said to you, God for Chash v'Shalom, now you're going to be blind completely and you're exempt from all the mitzvot, I'm taking away from something that you love to do so much. You know, I'm going to tell you, when I see the Zoom minion open up in the morning, and I'm looking and I'm saying, okay, did you daven yesterday? Yeah, I davened yesterday. Okay, well, I'll pick somebody else to daven today because I want to give people a chance. There are a half a dozen people on that minion that their whole life, including my own, by the way, is that they want to lead that davening. They want to daven. Marvin and Adele, they light up when I say daven Mariv together, and they daven Mariv together. Esther would daven every single day, 7 days a week. If I said to her, Esther, you're going to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the whole Shachrit, and not share with anybody, she'd be more happy than not, because she wants to do the whole thing. I want to do the whole thing. The only reason we started splitting it is because we want to give lots of people a chance to do something. Max Andrew kept on rambling right through Yishtabach. He never wanted to stop. And with one eye, and one eye, and he didn't want to stop. He wanted to go right through all the way to the end because he wanted to daven in his 90s to keep on davening all the way through. So you take away the mitzvot. If God forbid, chas v'shalom, he didn't have that one eye, he wouldn't be able to see the davening. It would be sad that he wouldn't be able to do all of the mitzvot because now he's exempt from mitzvot. We don't want to be exempt from mitzvot. Who wants to be exempt from mitzvot? You want to be able to perform mitzvot, to have mitzvot, to do mitzvot. We love mitzvot, not all of them.
Marshall, does being exempt from mean the same as not doing it? No, you can still do it, but you're not.
Some can, you correct. So there, you're right, but I'm not there yet, but you're right. But you know what, Esther? But here's the thing. There are certain things that be very difficult to do. So you might know the first or second or third or fourth or fifth line of every parsha, but you won't be able to read the whole cycle. You don't have the whole cycle memorized. The machzor, many of the tefillot you know off by heart, but many you don't know. Can you recite the whole Kol Nidre off by heart?
No, but you do what you can.
You can do what you can, 100%. But blind people are exempt at this point from obligation. Okay, that's the word. You're not obligated. You can do them if you want to. Of course, you can wash your hands and then say hamotzi. Nobody's going to say, you're not allowed to say hamotzi, you're blind. But you're exempt. You don't have to perform them. But to say to somebody you're exempt from mitzvot, that's a sad thing. We don't want to do that. So it's true that most of the earlier rabbis, the Rishonim, even the Achronim, disagree with Rabbeinu Yerucham. And this is where Esther was going, but she already took the idea. So no, but it's true. It's good that you're paying attention. So it's true is that the majority of rabbis have always held that blind people have to keep mitzvot. That's what we follow today. We don't say to somebody, oh, he's blind, he doesn't get an aliyah. And the guy says, wait a minute, I know the bracha, Baruch Hu es Adonai, Baruch, Baruch. I know the bracha, Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Amin Venatan Lanu et Torato. Why can't I have an aliyah? I know the bracha. No, you're blind, you can't. By the way, go eat treif. You don't get kosher meat anymore because you're blind. We don't say that. We don't do that. You're blind. Of course you can keep mitzvot. Obligation is something else, but the later rabbi said, no, you're obligated to keep the mitzvot that you can keep. That's where Esther was going. But before that, this was the belief. This is where they were going. So even if 1% or less of 1% of the people who receive treatment survive, then it's correct to do the treatment and violate Shabbos to save a life. So somebody's ill, they're having a heart attack. It's 1950. 1950, you had a heart attack, you probably died. My grandfather had a heart attack, I think it was 1950, went in the hospital, they said nothing we can do for him, died in a couple of days. Why? Because in the 50s, they didn't do quadruple bypasses, triple bypasses, put in stents, we didn't have a balloon. I call it the balloonogram, but you know what I mean? Where they open up the arteries we didn't have this kind of stuff. Today, we have all kinds of medical treatments that we can do. And if someone's having a heart attack, would we say, 99% of the people that have a heart attack die. So don't bother taking him to the hospital. We don't say that. We say, take him to the hospital. Maybe he's going to be lucky and be one of the 1% of the people that had the heart attack and then lives. So the correct thing to do is always to violate Shabbos. That's where I'm going. So there exists out there the following wrong idea. I'm quoting Rabbi Fink on this particular paragraph because I don't want to take credit for this thinking. It's his thought. Many people think that there is a scale of illness from minor to major. And at the end of the scale, it is only life-threatening conditions over here. But really, from the halachic point of view, this is not true. It's incorrect. From the halachic point of view, there is no scale. A life-threatening illness is a completely different context, which has nothing to do with the severity of pain. That's an important sentence. A life-threatening illness is a completely different context, which has nothing to do with the severity of pain or discomfort or the degree of limiting a person's ability to function. So we know this term because we've all heard it many times. It's a famous term, even in conservative Judaism, pekuach nefesh, to save a life. We're all told, pekuach nefesh. Well, in this case, saving someone's vision has exactly the same status as saving someone's life. And I'll even go further. In the 1940s, early 50s, there was a quota on Jewish people getting into university. I'm not teaching you anything new. And there were a lot of people that had the marks to get into medical school, and they weren't getting in because of quotas. And many of them wanted to do something, so they went into pharmacy. And pharmacy was a 2-year program, and later on it became a 3-year program, and later on it became a 4-year program. It changed around 1950, but in the late 40s, so they would go in and they would become pharmacists. If in those days a pharmacist had to do compounding, mortar and pestle, and fill prescriptions differently than we do even today, right? So a pharmacist who is making medicine for someone is actually performing the act of pekuach nefesh. So if they're working on Shabbos and they're making and grinding, by the way, is one of the 39 malachas. There's no grinding. It's like grinding flour is the term they use. You can't grind flour, therefore you can't grind anything. You're not allowed to take a pepper mill. You can use a pepper shaker, but you're not allowed to take a pepper mill and grind it. You know why? By the way, who knows why? Not just because it's grinding, but somebody tell me, because it's an interesting one.
You're
Okay.
breaking up the seeds or whatever you call the little bits of pepper. So you're destroying.
No,
Pepper.
you're allowed to destroy on Shabbos. You can't build. Here, watch this. Are these two papers any good? No more. I just ruined them, right? I ruined it. One's like misshapen. I'm not going to use this to write a happy birthday card on it. It doesn't look very nice. And this one, look at that. I'm going to write you a letter on that. No. Now watch. See, halacha is not a science. It's an art, right? I take the same kind of paper, okay? And I very gingerly that's forbidden. That's not allowed on Shabbos. Two perfect pieces of paper. Why? I'm constructing, I'm creating, I'm building, I'm making something. I am creating something usable, a usable kli. A kli is a utensil. I'm making a usable utensil. Now this is better than this. Now I can write I can write a beautiful letter to Esther. I can write a beautiful letter to John. I have I can make this now 4, so I can include Ava and Noreen. I'll make a nice line, make 4 pages. You can't do that. That's usher on Shabbos. That you can't do. So the idea of something is the term, this is, have you heard of the word kedarko? Of course you have, Esther has. Kedarko means in a normal way. In a normal way. Kedarko is used by the rabbis in many different contexts. It's used in the terms of sex. There is a normal way and an abnormal way. Lo kedarko. It's used in the context of cooking. Cooking, kedarko means you take a pot of water, you put it on the thing, you make a soup, right? Or you put a frying pan and you cook something. That's a normal way of cooking. Is taking an egg and cracking it on the sidewalk and letting it cook on the sidewalk in the sun in 140-degree heat in California, kedarko, is that a normal way of cooking? Do you normally do that? No. Because it's not a normal way of cooking, you're allowed to do it. It's called bishul b'chama, cooking in the sun. So I can do that. If I want, it's a hot day in the summer and I want to be that Michigan, my from neighborhood here, to crack an egg and I'm outside in the sidewalk and cook it so the sun should cook it. That's called bishul b'chama. The Shulchan Aruch allows that. I'm not doing it, but it allows it. Same thing. If you take a pepper mill, you're using an everyday utensil, something that I use on Monday for my pasta, something that I use on Tuesday for my salad, something that I use on Wednesday for my onions. I don't know, but you're doing something that is a normal utensil that you use every single day, kedarko. And because you're doing it every day and you're grinding in that fashion, you're not allowed to grind that way on Shabbat. It's like a flour mill. But listen to this. Oops, I want pepper in my chicken soup. And I want pepper, but I don't have any. There's nothing in the shaker. I ran out. I forgot to buy pepper. All I have are peppercorns. Take the peppercorns, put them between 2 pieces of paper, take a hammer and smash them. Take a knife and cut them up, as Adele suggested. Now, because it's lo kedarko, it's called a shinui. It's something
Shinui.
different. Shinui, right, Esther? So I'm doing something differently. If I do it differently and would you normally in front of your company on a table, take a hammer and start banging peppercorns to make pepper? No, you wouldn't. You'd say, I'm all out of pepper. I don't. Would I do it 100%? I would. I like pepper. So maybe I would cut the pepper up. You're allowed to take a knife on a cutting board and chop up pepper, just like you're allowed to chop up a radish. You're allowed to cut a radish. So if you can cut a radish, why can't I cut up a peppercorn? So I'm going to chop up the peppercorn with the sharp knife. Be careful not to cut your fingers. Take the peppercorns that are now cracked up, and you can take it and you can put it into your chicken soup, and it's completely allowed on Shabbos. That's a far stretch from where we're going, but something is kedarko, something is not kedarko. A Jew, according to this opinion of the possibility and running the risk of not looking after your eyes and going blind in both eyes, we know it's a bad decision. But the worst part of that decision is they're not going to be able to perform the mitzvahs that they want to perform anymore. That's why the rabbis are making a leniency. And they're saying that if the person is never going to be able to have those mitzvot again in their life, it's of course correct to violate one Shabbat. Violate that Shabbat so that you'll have many more in the future. I think it's a beautiful thing in the Gemara. I think it's one of the most beautiful things. Violate the Shabbat so you'll have many more Shabbatot later. Like the Gemara is filled with beautiful sentences, it's filled with all kinds of weird things too, but that's one of the nice things. So this is a leniency that applies in violating Shabbat in terms of a person's eyesight. So what's the bottom line? The person who's not sick and doesn't fall into a category of illness, nonetheless, it's always going to be correct to not only ask a non-Jew, but even a Jew. You don't need to ask a non-Jew. You can ask your Jewish friend. You can do it yourself. This is the case, which is not exactly pekuach nefesh. You're not exactly saving a life, but you're saving vision. And therefore, it's correct to set aside all of the laws of Shabbat to save this vision. And pekuach nefesh has a long stretch. So that pharmacist that's grinding the medicine in the mortar and pestle, that's giving medicine to that person who needs that medicine that saves their life, even if they have the pain in one large area of the body and it's not the whole body, it's a really bad headache, and they have to grind up a medicine which will take care of this person's migraine, that's considered enough to violate Shabbat. Not everybody agrees. And when it comes to the leniency of this person going to that hospital and eating treif food, because remember we said he's not going to have kosher food, how is he going to go and get treated? So Rav Shlomo Kluger, he said that his heart doesn't allow him to rely on such a leniency. I feel I cannot go ahead and instruct people to follow it. However, if this person can go to the non-Jewish hospital and be treated with the possibility of being treated by the physician with the possibility of saving their vision, then that limit of treif food that you eat there, just make it a small amount. Well, what does that mean, make it a small amount? I'll give you the bottom line. I mean, it's Pesach, let's say, the most stringent time of the year. You got to go, you got to get your eyes looked after, you're there. There's nothing kosher there. There's no matzah, there's bread. There's bread, that's what you're going to get. Bread and water and cereal and French, I don't know, whatever they're going to make you, but that's, I was going to say French toast. So they're saying, limit it, Shlomo Kluger says. Eat a kazayit, it's enough to keep you going into lunch, then eat only what you have to eat. Don't say, this is delicious, give me more maple syrup, I'm going to have 4 slices. You don't need 4 slices. You normally have 2 slices, have a half a slice, have 1 slice. That's what he's saying. Maybe have none. Maybe eat the carrots and the celery and the cucumbers and the vegetables, the fruit. Don't forget. It's easy to say this. The main meal in Talmudic times was bread. Bread that was baked in very small ovens, and that's why kashrut was a big issue. And you weren't allowed to use any dairy, and you had to be careful of the fats that were smeared on the oven because they pushed it inside the oven walls. That became the pan. You didn't have a pan, They stuffed dough inside an oven and it baked. Those days, it was bread. You filled up on lots and lots of bread, and you ate small amounts of other things. You know, they didn't have no frills. You couldn't just run and buy, I'll have every color of pepper I want, a yellow one, a red one, a green one, and an orange one we have in a package, you know, today, or English cucumbers, you know, and all the beautiful things that we have. They were, depending on what time of year it was. Maybe it was winter and there just weren't any cucumbers. There was pickled onions. And there was, I don't know what they had to probably eat brine pickled things and breads, right? That's what they ate. So it's Pesach, you're going to eat only the amount that you need to have to survive and not extra. That's what he says. Well, here, I'll stop in 1 minute because it's 10:02. Before we go on to what the modern poskim say next time, imagine it's a powerful idea that Rav Shlomo Kluger is coming up with, because he's saying violate even Pesach, violate Shabbos, violate kashrut, throw it out the window if you have to save your eyes, but only eat what you have to have. That's a powerful idea, according to which threat of vision is not in the category of whole body sickness. It's just your eyes. I'm not being ridiculous here and saying it's only your eyes. I take my eyes very seriously, as we all do, but it's not a threat to your life. Blindness is not yet considered a threat to your life. No one thinks that this person is going to die. However, it's still correct to put aside Shabbos. That's what he says. And Rav Shlomo himself, after presenting the idea, he himself is not confident and willing to put this leniency in place. But what's he doing? He's joining it together with everyone else, because he knows that not everybody else agrees with this approach. Remember, we talked about riding the bicycle in the neighborhood. I said, if they don't do it in your community, don't do it. Some people kosher a microwave for Pesach. They put a glass of water in it, they heat it up, they feel it's kosher enough, and they use it, right? Some people do not. What does your community do? You have to ask and find out. So already, Rav Shlomo Kluger, where he's making a big step, is to say, I know they're not going to follow this rule. If I say you can't go, you're not going to die if you go blind. Nobody's going to follow that. If they're not going to follow it, what's the point of putting the rule in place? If I make a rule and nobody's going to follow it, there's no point in having the rule. It's a stupid rule. So he doesn't want to do that. So what's he doing? He's smart. He goes along with the community. Think of this, and we'll stop here. Electric lighting on a timer. If we said, you're not allowed to put electric lights on a timer anymore, we just came up with a reason why it's us or you're not allowed to do it, you're not going to stop doing it. If you keep Shabbos, you're going to keep on doing it. I've been doing it already my whole life. I'm going to keep on doing it. You don't like it, too bad. Same thing. It's the same approach. There are leniencies which are created to go along with the community. Next week, we're going to look at what the Tzitz Eliezer says. He was the medical expert at Shari Tzedek Hospital in Israel, and we'll see what he says, Rav Eliezer Yehuda Waldenberg, about this issue, and we'll wrap up the idea of Shabbos. But we're going to talk about a different idea next week, and it's called the double suffix. I want to see this 1 second. This is the illuminations. A double suffix is a double doubt. One doubt, two doubts. What do you do if you have two doubts on an opinion? Okay, that's it. I'm going to stop there, and we'll continue. I hope I didn't bore you too much.